it's over. Everybody's gone away. I should be gone, but she asked me to stay.
But we start with the party, which at least three sources, ITV News, Laura Koonsberger, the BBC, Sky News, various others, at least three sources are saying was attended by Boris Johnson at precisely the time when such gatherings, such parties were illegal. ITV News breaking this, as you will be aware, but it has been the dominant conversation, and it bloody deserves to be, with the lies that this man at the top of Downing Street has told time and time and time and time and time again, since probably he was born, quite frankly, but certainly since he's been any kind of public figure in his professional life, in his political life, and certainly in his personal life as well. The lies spill from the mouth of this individual as easily as he breathes. That is known. That is not surprising. But what we have now is evidence of Johnson having attended not just his own department, not just his own people saying, hey, come and have a party, bring your own bottle, but him and the current Mrs. Johnson also attending a party as well, at a time when it was illegal to do so, to meet more than one person from a different household outdoors. That was the law at the time, the law created by, Boris Johnson's government. That's the phrase that springs to mind here. Now, let's just look at the email that was sent by Martin Reynolds, Boris Johnson's principal private secretary, who, by the way, he might as well go to sleep under a bus this evening to save Boris Johnson the trouble of chucking him there, which he assuredly will. The question is whether Johnson can survive, and I hope the answer is no. But this is the email from Johnson's principal private secretary, Martin Reynolds, and this was concerning this party that took place on the 20th of May. Hi all. Well, after what's been an incredibly busy period, we thought it would be nice to make the most of the lovely weather and have some socially distanced drinks in the number 10 garden this evening. Please join us from 6 p.m. and bring your own booze. So that's the email that went to number 10 staff from Johnson's principal private secretary, talking about a party taking place at 6 o'clock that evening on May the 20th in 2020, okay? Less than an hour before that, Oliver Dowden, who was the culture secretary at the time, was leading the then daily or near daily coronavirus press conferences. This is what Oliver Dowden said an hour before that law-breaking Downing Street party.
You can spend time outdoors and exercise as often as you like, and you can meet one person outside your household in an outdoor public place, provided that you stay 2 meters apart.
That was just after 5 p.m. At 6 p.m, again, we've got multiple sources reporting that Johnson and the current Mrs. Johnson were among those attending this party, among 40 people gathered in the garden, number 10 Downing Street, for a bring your own booze party. Now, what does bring your own booze say to you? That doesn't say gathering, that doesn't say work event, that says party. It always has. For me, I suspect the same is true for you as well. 5 days after that, this is the 25th of May, 5 days after that party, Johnson suggested that rule breakers should be reported to the police.
Since the restrictions have been lifted, there are large groups gathering in local parks, ignoring all social distancing rules. When many of us are being so vigilant and staying alert, what can be done to discourage this blatant disregard for the rules? Well, Claire, I'm going to hand over to Yvonne to talk a little bit about transmission outdoors. But let me just say that it is absolutely vital that all of us continue to observe the rules on social distancing, on washing our hands, and making sure that if we have symptoms that we self-isolate, get a test as we go forward. And the only reason we've been able to make as much progress as we have, the only reason that I'm able to announce that we're able finally to begin getting schools back, to begin getting retail back from the 1st of June is because this country has observed the social distancing rules. So, Claire, what I would say is, obviously, you should feel free to speak to people yourself if you feel that they're not obeying the rules, but the police will step in if necessary and encourage people to obey the law.
Really? That was Johnson 5 days after the party that took place at and in the grounds of Downing Street, which by definition, by its very happening, broke the laws introduced by Johnson during the worst of the first wave. And here, from last year, from the 12th of, this is from the 7th of December, I should say, 7th of December last year, this is Johnson when news of this succession of rule-breaking parties started emerging. This is what he said, assuring us all that no rules had been broken.
What I can tell you is that all the guidelines were observed, continue to be observed, and what I can also tell you is that we're getting on with the job as we have been throughout, of dealing with the priorities of the people, particularly fighting crime.
So was it a party where the guidelines were followed, or was it not a party?
I can tell you that the guidelines were followed at all times.
Well, did you investigate that yourself? Have you satisfied yourself that that is the case?
I have satisfied myself that the guidelines were followed at all times. And what I can also tell you is that we're focusing on the issues that matter to me above all, and that is fighting crime, and I believe those are the things that matter also to the British public.
Well, yesterday, Johnson was asked specifically about the party which many sources are reporting he attended, which many witnesses are reporting they saw him at. He was asked yesterday about that party, the one we're discussing this evening on the 20th of May.
I want to ask you about the latest allegations on Christmas parties. Did you and Carrie attend the Downing Street party that was organised by Martin Reynolds on the 20th of May?
All of that, as you know, is the subject of a proper investigation by Sue Gray.
So have you already been interviewed by Sue Gray, and if not, do you object to her questioning you again about this?
All that is subject for an interview, for an investigation by Sue Gray.
Callous, sniggering, dissembling oaf. Answer the question, yes or no, were you there? How difficult is it? Who do you think you are fooling with this nonsense? Why does Sue Gray have to be presented as the only person who's able to answer the question about whether you attended the party or not? You liar. You filthy liar. 0345 6060973. You can text 84850, tweet at LBC, email Darren at lbc.co.uk. Why shouldn't this be the end for this morally vacant liar, Boris Johnson, with whom we appear to be stuck at the moment? Why shouldn't this not be the end for him? This is what, the seventh party we're talking about that broke the rules? And even those people who defended him on previous occasions, who said, well, it's not like he was there. Yes, it might have been his people. I can see why he's very angry that he was let down by people around him that were sending out invites to these parties. Well, that defence is gone. Bye-bye to that. Unless you think he wasn't there, unless you think that the only person who's able to determine objective truth in this matter is, in fact, Sue Gray, and she's only doing the job because her predecessor had to step down from the role because his own department were having rule-breaking parties. What part of this don't you file under you can't make this up? 0345 6060973. Just before we came on air, I spoke to Rachel Wormuth, senior political correspondent at the Daily Mirror, newspaper that's broken very many of these stories about these parties, and she told me that, yes, as far as she's concerned as well, it would appear that Johnson and Carrie had attended this party.
Well, the fact remains that Downing Street has not yet denied that Boris Johnson and his wife were indeed at this party that was said to be around 30 or 40 people in attendance. And we know in black and white from the email sent from one of his top officials, his principal private secretary, Martin Reynolds, that around 100 employees were invited, and some of the wording in the email itself is actually quite I guess you'd say damning for the PM. It says, We thought it would be nice to make the most of the lovely weather. I mean, who's the we in that sentence?
And bring your own booze. That's not a gathering. That's not a work event. That's a party.
It's a party. I mean, there's no interpretation of this email that doesn't clearly break the rules. I mean, we know that the then Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden gave a press conference that very same day saying you can meet one person of your household in an outdoor public place provided you stay 2 meters apart. Here we have, the Prime Minister's top official inviting 100 employees.
So what does this say about this sordid stream of witless minions that's been dragged out by Number 10 over the last few weeks to say, oh, it was a work event, oh, it was just drinks after work, oh, everyone was wearing a suit and tie, it wasn't really a party. We now have evidence of Johnson attending a party at this crucial time when the entire country was under lockdown. This has to be different, doesn't it, from previous revelations?
It certainly does feel that way. Yeah, I think there's pressure on a number of people in this situation. Actually, there seems to be pressure at the moment on Martin Reynolds to resign, one of his top civil servants. There's pressure on the Met Police to launch an investigation into what seems to be a very clear-cut case of rule breaking here, and on the Prime Minister, he's under pressure on several fronts. It seems, he's now going to have to give evidence to Sue Gray, who's the Cabinet Office enforcer, who is looking at a number of parties in Downing Street and across Whitehall. He'll be asked to give evidence, for the Mirror understands, right, in that. And it seems he's also misled Parliament in that, yes, when we had the revelations about, remember the fake press conference in which we saw Allegra Stratton seeming to joke about a party, he said in the House of Commons the next day that he shared the public's anger and that of Number 10 staff making light of lockdown. Yeah. And he thought it was infuriating to think the people who have been setting the rules have not been following the rules. That seems to me a clear case of him misleading Parliament if he indeed was at this event. This
is the only defence, logically, that I can see that he has now is that when he stood up with that faux anger at the start of Prime Minister's questions, the sort of cold open before he even had the first question, if you remember that a couple of months ago, his only defence now is if he says, I was angry about the jokes that were being made about the parties, but I wasn't angry about the party that I attended myself.
Well, his words specifically were, I find it infuriating to think that the people who've been setting the rules have not been following the rules.
But we've been here before. This is a Prime Minister who lies and lies and lies. He lies as easily as he breathes, and we seem to be also at a time in our history when that does not matter, when any number of crises, scandals, appalling examples of egregious behaviour would at the very least have seen the Prime Minister censured, have led to no consequences at all. Will this?
I think some of the most powerful stuff that we heard last night was from people who've lost loved ones to COVID around about that time. There was a young lady called Hannah Brady whose father, she lost her father to COVID around that time, and she went and visited Downing Street herself and spoke to the Prime Minister about how her father died. And how her family had done everything to stop the spread of COVID, followed all of the rules. And she said that, the Prime Minister said that they also did everything that they could. And I think when you hear things like that, I think it's very, very difficult to dismiss this as okay in some way.
So what does this moral vacuum do at Prime Minister's questions this week on Wednesday? He can't do the same trick again of pretending to be really angry before he's even asked a question at PMQs, can he?
I suspect he might say that there are investigations ongoing and that Sue Gray is looking at all of these matters, but I think, given everything that we've heard and that he isn't denying whether he's there, I think there'll be huge public pressure on him to just make clear what happened. Yes. And I don't see how that can go any other way at this point.
One of the most eye-watering elements of all of this in the last few months has been the attempt made only half-heartedly by some people, because it is so preposterous, to defend this behaviour or to excuse it, at least on the basis that these flats are Crown property and therefore they weren't bound by the laws of the land as they related to coronavirus. Is that hoary old zombie defence going to be dragged out again, do you think?
I mean, he might be able to try and say that to journalists, but I mean, I would like to see him try that with the public who've been living a very different life in their own homes.
It might keep him out of prison.
I don't know if there's any actual threat of him going to prison over any of this, but he's certainly under a great deal of political pressure.
But there's a serious point, which is that we know that the criminal justice process was being levied against people at this time for breaking these rules. Okay, people might not have been going to prison, but they were being fined, they were being challenged by the police. And nothing, absolutely nothing happening to Johnson. 5 o'clock on the day in question, as you alluded to, Oliver Dowden says the vast majority of people should be staying at home as much as possible, as Johnson was presumably getting his party frock on.
So it would seem, and I think when you have sort of young people, we know of people in their 20s who held, parties and what have you, who've been fined as much as £10,000, and that could put somebody in debt for most of their, young adult life. And I think that's very hard to swallow if you see just that level of hypocrisy. Yeah.
10 grand, it's a lot of wallpaper for Carrie, isn't it?
It's a lot of wallpaper for Boris Johnson and his wife, Carrie Johnson, yeah.
As I say, the Mirror has been at the heart of this for much of this scandal over the last few months, and most of these revelations have come from your newspaper. I tried this question on your colleague Dan Bloom a few weeks ago, and he wasn't able to answer. I'll try it on you. Do you have any more revelations coming?
We're always looking for new revelations. My colleagues are working on stories all of the time. But I guess people will just have to keep buying the Daily Mirror.
Without question. But do you detect that there is any fatigue amongst your readers or among the public more widely, simply because there have been so many of these breaches now?
Absolutely not. That's not the feeling that I get from our readers at all. It's certainly not how we're seeing, it play out in terms of the figures of the stories that people are reading online. The stories that we write about lockdown breaches get read very, very widely. So I don't detect a fall in interest at all, quite the opposite.
All right. That was Rachel Wormuth, senior political correspondent at the Daily Mirror, to whom I spoke just before we came on air. We've got one line into the building right now, so I think Rachel's right. There is, and you would have heard Tom's show as well, the entirety of his programme dedicated to this. For every person who says, this is boring, talk about something else, this doesn't matter, I reckon there are 10 saying the opposite. And that's probably true right across the country. This, I think, has touched a nerve. This, I really do think, even more than the previous revelations of Johnson and his government and various departments all breaking the rules that his government introduced, I think this has touched a nerve more acutely even than those stories. Might be wrong, we might be back to Con+3 in 7 days from now, but right now it does feel as if this is significant, and it absolutely ought to be, as far as I'm concerned. Johnson, just to bring you up to speed at 1:20, he's not denied attending a lockdown-breaking party when the rest of us could only see one other person outside. Instead, he has said that this particular piece of information is going to be determined by Sue Gray. That's where he is. That's where his lack of backbone has taken him. He's unable to say yes or no to a simple question, instead saying this very simple fact about me is or is not going to be, or is going to be determined by somebody else. I'm incapable of answering. That's who we have as Prime Minister. Well done, everyone. Apart from anything else, it's really hard to keep count, isn't it? Literally just to keep track of the number of rule-breaking parties. All we can say is, with certainty, that the number is large and unknown and growing, like the number of Father's Day cards that can be expected to arrive at number 10 Downing Street, possibly. 0345 6060973. Anne's in Norfolk. Morning, Anne.
Hello.
Anne, good morning. Hello.
My first thought is, who is leaking this and what have they got to gain?
That's a
It's sort of remained hidden for well over a year. And so that's my first thought.
It's a very interesting question. What's your suspicion?
Well, whoever decided that Mr. Johnson was their useful idiot has now decided they want someone else.
Well, that would be Dominic
my
Cummings.
personal view.
That would be Dominic Cummings, presumably, wouldn't it?
Oh, I'm sure he's stirring the pot somewhere.
Oh, without question.
Secondly, it's bold or arrogant to send an email. I mean, they seem to be known for using WhatsApps and
Yes.
encrypted things.
Yeah. It is incredible, isn't it? Just incredible.
Thirdly,
I think just on that point, though, on this technical point, from what I can see, what is being printed in the newspapers, what's being published, appears to be a screen grab taken with a camera phone. That's what it looks like to me. So I'm not sure that the email itself has necessarily been forwarded to someone.
Yes, because they'd have an intranet or something there, wouldn't they?
I guess so, but it looks, I mean, just looking at the kind of quality of the image, as if someone has snapped an image of the screen using their phone or using a camera or whatever. That's what it looks like to me.
Maybe that was Dominic.
Maybe.
Because he would have been included, I assume.
Yeah. It's also worth, just on that point, remembering that 5 days after this party, or within a couple of days of this party, we learned that Dominic Cummings had tested his eyesight by taking his wife to a beauty spot near Barnard Castle during lockdown.
Having carefully, with his wife, planted tales in The Spectator that would suggest something different.
Well, certainly told tales that didn't absolutely line up, yes. Anyway. Sorry,
I do have a smidgen of sympathy for Mr. Johnson.
Okay.
Because I accept that it wasn't long after he'd been in hospital, and he may well have been convalescing, and also his girlfriend had a new baby. But the bottom line is that they seem to have no morals.
Yeah.
There's incessant lying, and there's absolutely no empathy.
Well, the point about Carrie recently having had a child, I mean, it looks as if we're going to be able to say that quite a lot during Johnson's premiership. But he certainly, when he stood up in the Commons last month and did that faux anger thing and talked about how furious he was that these parties had apparently taken place and were being joked about, he must have done that in the knowledge that he was at one of these parties and chose not to say anything.
But the bottom line with him is, I think he finds it impossible to tell the truth.
I agree. I think he is incapable of distinguishing between reality and fiction when it suits him to ignore the difference.
He's an accomplished liar.
For sure.
Oh, he's an actor, isn't he?
Well, actors are convincing, though. When you watch a masterful performance, when you watch an actor on stage or in a film, that actor wants you to suspend disbelief and buy into the reality that's being presented on the screen or on the stage. Johnson can't do that. We know he's lying. We know it's all rubbish.
But the sad thing is, we're being groomed. We're just so used to him always lying. And I don't think people now take anything seriously enough. You think, what's the point of complaining? Media's on his side. Just suck it up. There's nothing we can do.
Do you think it is changing?
It's quite dispiriting.
Do you think that the point you make about the media being on his side, I think you can probably listen to this programme and determine that we're not part of that, at least between 1 and 4 in the morning. Do you think the media is still on his side, though? I mean, the front pages this morning, I suspect, are Daily Mail has Boris rocked by new party revelations in gigantic type, and that's the Mail. That's the in-house comic of the Conservative Party.
I'm concerned because he doesn't have a particularly wonderful cabinet. They are all pretty mediocre.
Yes.
And you just wonder who the right-wing media now want instead.
Well, again, if you want to be, well, not even conspiratorial, because they are mates. Dominic Cummings and Michael Gove have been thick as thieves for a very long time. And you don't have to connect too many dots to imagine a scenario in which Dominic Cummings is pushing Michael Gove forward in whichever leadership contest happens by destabilising Johnson. We know, of course, he doesn't like Johnson anymore because he was fired. Not fired for making up crap about testing his eyesight by driving to Barnard Castle during lockdown, but fired by Johnson for being rude about Johnson's then-girlfriend. Mark's in Tottenham. Morning, Mark. Mark, hello, are you there? Can we get Mark back? He can't hear me.
Hello?
Oh, Mark, yes, you can. Hello, can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes, what's your point, Mark?
I think Boris is very economical with the truth, and he cannot be trusted as a Prime Minister, and the sooner he goes, the better.
Do you think he will? Do you think he will, Mark? Go. I think what has gone is Mark's phone line. Listen, Paul's in Blackburn. If I go to the call now, we'll crash into the news. So I'll come to you in just a few minutes, Paul, straight after the news. The number's 0345 606 0973. Producer Joe had a great idea earlier. I don't mention that because it's unusual. I just mentioned it because it's a thing that happened. And he said, have a look back in your camera phone to see if you took any pictures on the 20th of May 2020 to see what you were up to. Now, I was so fortunate during lockdown and during the pandemic. My partner as well. We were both able to do our jobs from home, and we were both able to do jobs, the demand for which continued and apparently continues. Very, very fortunate, very, very lucky. We didn't lose anyone to COVID. We didn't suffer any losses of that nature. We didn't have to grieve anyone. We weren't grieving those among the 150,000 people who've lost their life because of COVID over the last couple of years. So I look back in that spirit to the 20th of May 2020 to see what I was doing. And the photo I've taken on that day, and this shows you just how boring my life was on that day and how little I was doing, how little most of us we were doing. I was doing the show from home in Edinburgh. We'd moved the show there to work from home. A lot of my colleagues were also broadcasting from home as well. As you recall, in fact, I think Sheila Fogarty was doing her show from a childhood bedroom in Liverpool. If you think back to that period. The most exciting thing that happened to me on the 20th of May 2020, I had taken a photograph, having been to the supermarket to do essential shopping, one of the two things you were allowed to do at that point. You could go to the supermarket and you could go outside for an hour of exercise every day. I'd gone to the supermarket and I was so excited because my local supermarket had back in stock my favourite brand of espresso coffee. And I'd taken a photograph of it, presumably to share on social media. That is how boring life was under lockdown. That's the extent to which I was sticking to the rules. You may have been sticking to the rules and probably were to precisely the same tedious but necessary extent at precisely the moment when Oliver Dowden was telling us of the importance of doing such a thing and Johnson was getting ready to party and bring his own booze, which, by the way, I bet he didn't. Paul's in Blackburn. Thanks for hanging on there, Paul. Morning.
Hiya, Darren. Right. I totally agree with everything you said, but I think it goes further. I think we need the whole government to offer resignation and bring about a general election. And if this doesn't happen, I think what should happen is something should be put in place whereby people can bring about an e-petition to petition for an election. What do you think of that?
Well, it would be nice, but it's not going to happen. And if you wanted to create that system, if you want to create a system where governments could be ejected by use of petition, then you'd have to get the current government to agree to that, and that's not going to happen either.
Unfortunate bit, but
I mean, I get the frustration. Well, okay, so what are the alternatives electorally? There are local elections taking place in big parts of the country this year. The Conservatives' own internal pollster suggests that in London, at least, they're going to be absolutely hammered, possibly the worst result for 50 years, and that's before evidence of this latest lie was unearthed yesterday. So it's what's possible, Paul, is that we get to those local elections. Johnson's party is absolutely hammered. His craven backbenchers, who are more interested in their fate even than he is in his, get cold feet and they kick him out and replace him with someone like Liz Truss. Is that a better world?
Let's hope so, but I prefer the whole government to go. I mean, it's not just the lies, is it? I mean, allegedly 60% of contracts have been handed to Tory donors, and there's so much other stuff. The way they've managed the whole pandemic, apart from the vaccination programme, which is largely down to the vaccination creators and the NHS.
Without question.
Yeah. What have they got right?
Well, on the 60% claim that you make, I'm not able to verify that in real time, but I take the wider point that the very great deal of the way that the government has responded to this has been appalling. There are success stories, and I would point to vaccination as well, with the caveat that you also make, that it's very largely because of the fantastic work that's been done by the National Health Service and other agencies as well in delivering this, in getting that number of vaccinations into that number of arms has taken a fantastic effort, and certainly one would say well done to this country for doing that. There are downsides, of course. We hoarded vaccinations. We are one of those countries who was arguably responsible for allowing variants like Omicron to develop and spread by not having vaccination spread to as many other corners of the world as I think we ought to. But yeah, on the face of it, if you compare, at least in the first months of vaccination, this country with other countries, we did rather well. We're kind of middling now, by the way, if you compare the UK with vaccination records in the rest of Europe, say. We're about halfway up the table. We're no longer world-beating, to borrow a phrase from a moron. Paul, thank you in Blackburn. 0345 6060 973 is the number. Lorraine's in Birmingham. She says the Tories seem to think they're unfathomable, and after 12 years I'm not convinced otherwise. Adam's in Poplar. Morning, Adam.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, it's getting a bit like a Monty Python film. It's just beyond belief. But what I can't understand, Johnson is Johnson. Yeah, at the end of the day, Leopard doesn't change his spots. What I really don't understand is the upper reaches of the Conservative Party supposed to be full of intelligent men. I mean, anybody can see that every minute this guy is still in place, he's damaging them. Forget about that red wall and that 80-seat majority. That's gone already. You know, I mean, why would you keep somebody as bad as this in place just to do more damage? Because at the end of the day, if they let him run to his full term, chances are they probably won't get re-elected for 20 or 30 years.
Well, you've absolutely touched on what drives the Conservative Party, Adam, and that is the desire for self-preservation. And I think we're actually pretty close to the point where those backbenchers say, well, we've never liked you, Johnson, but you got us a seat on the green benches. We don't think you can win that seat for us once again. Therefore, we're going to get rid of you. I think that point is getting closer and closer, Adam.
Well, last week research was in the Daily Mail, and basically they said that his own Conservative constituency of Uxbridge wouldn't even re-elect him. You know, he's not even really a viable MP anymore, let alone Prime Minister.
Well, that's a really brilliant point too, because in 2019... he was, well, actually in 2017, he got a majority of, I think, about 5,000. So that seat was kind of a marginal. That's a pretty shaky seat for a Prime Minister to hold, a pretty shaky majority. And actually, let's not refight Brexit, but had Remainers got their act together in that seat, it was entirely possible that Johnson could have been kicked out of Parliament. Do you think he can hold Uxbridge at the next election?
No, it's impossible. He can't hold it. It's gone. So he's no longer actually an MP if they have another election. That's why a couple of callers ago he's asking for a general election. That's the one thing that he will never allow to happen, as long as he can anyway, yeah?
Well, yeah.
He's no longer an MP.
The smart money, I guess, had been on there being a general election sometime before the end of 2023, which would be about 4 years since 2019. You don't want to go full term because it looks desperate. It was when John Major did it in 1997. You kind of, if you can, you want to go after about 4 years because it shows confidence. I think any confidence that he feels he has at the moment is vastly displaced. And Adam, thank you for that. We add Uxbridge and South Ruislip to the list of extremely interesting seats at the next general election. Dominic Raab's seat in Esher, probably right at the very top of that list. If you're looking for a Portillo moment in the next general election, keep an eye on Raab's face for as long as you can bear to. Jackie's in Cheltenham. Morning, Jackie.
Good morning, Darren.
Hi.
Hiya. I just wanted to say, even my two sons who have learning disabilities, they're both adults in their 20s, late 20s, got it that they couldn't, got the rules. I mean, for example, their sister lives in Wokingham. We live in Cheltenham, and their sister lives in Wokingham with their partner, and they understood that she couldn't see them, and they were devastated, but they didn't, get cross, angry, or anything. They just accepted it, and they couldn't even see their nan, who lives in Cheltenham, and she's in her mid-70s.
And has your son been aware of these?
Both my sons have learning disabilities.
Are they aware of the stories that come out about Boris Johnson breaking the rules?
Definitely. My eldest got severe autism and learning disabilities. My middle son's got moderate learning disabilities. They both, watch the news, and we explain to them what's going on.
And what do they think then when they see that the leaders of our country are breaking the rules that they kept?
Oh, my son's been, really cross, really cross. And my other son, who's got severe autism, and this made me really laugh. He calls Boris Johnson Dipsy from the Teletubbies.
I mean, he's been called worse, but I quite like that.
Yeah, Dipsy from the Teletubbies.
Dipsy. Yeah.
I mean, he also said that my dog Bella would make a better Prime Minister.
Well, I'll tell you what, the way things are going, your dog Bella would have more parliamentary support by the sounds of it than Boris Johnson.
Probably would, actually.
More chance
She's an English bulldog, too.
Well, there we go. More chance of keeping some of those Tories in their seats. Jackie, thank you in Cheltenham. John is in Sanderford. Morning, John.
Oh, hello there. You all right?
Very well, sir. Good to hear from you. What do you think?
Yeah, Happy New Year.
And to you.
By the way, it's this party and Boris Johnson seems to be a party that just keeps on changing the rules and breaking the rules. They just keep on, just drifting from from point to point and just covering their backs.
Well, what matters here is the rules that were in place on the 20th of May 2020, which absolutely prohibited the party that Boris Johnson apparently attended.
Yeah, and he seems to be covering it up in a nice way, like, he seems to be passing the blame onto somebody else, and he just seems to be saying, oh, I wasn't there, or, I didn't do this, and he just seems to be just making an excuse for everything.
Well, I just find it...
Let's face it, we're a nation of excuses sometimes, and this guy needs to get out as soon as possible.
What I find really strange, again, when he's asked the question directly, did you attend this party, was an accusation of wrongdoing. Instead of saying no or yes, he says, ask Sue Gray. There's an inquiry going on to this. If I accused you of wrongdoing, John... You might lie to me, you might say, no, I didn't do that, or you might say, yes, I did, but you wouldn't say, ask someone else, would you?
Yeah. No, mind you, that's like he's playing the civil servant there. He's passing the buck. But
he's passing the buck about something that he did or did not do himself. That doesn't require. It surely doesn't require a civil servant to determine the answer to that question. As far as he's concerned, he's got a memory, hasn't he? He knows if he was there himself.
Yeah, but in the civil service, they kind of just buck passing and just putting the blame onto somebody else and delaying the event.
Well, he's bought himself some time, maybe by saying, wait to find out what Sue Gray thinks is the answer to the question, did I do a bad thing? John, thank you in Sanderford. I'm old enough to remember when lying to the House of Commons was considered to be a resigning matter, particularly if it was done deliberately. And we only have to look back at things that Johnson has said about these parties and how angry he was, and try to square that with the reality that he expressed that faux anger at a time when he knew and must have known, unless he genuinely forgot, that he was at one of these parties. But I'll tell you something, if I was going to be vehemently expressing my anger about a particular thing, I'd want to make damn sure I hadn't done the bad thing myself. Jean's in Croydon. Morning, Jean.
Morning, Darren. It took me back to when I was young about this lying. My dad always said, you tell us a little lie, he said, you will lie forever. He said, no one will ever believe anything you say. He said, and I would rather trust a thief than a liar. And he was staunch on that. He brought us up like that. And I agree, he should absolutely be slung out. Because he's just an habitual liar. Everything that comes out, the next week it's a lie.
Yeah. But this isn't new. This has been known about Johnson for decades, I would contend. Why do you think people are rightly angry about it now, but only getting angry about it now?
Well, I think he's absolutely done himself. He's greedy. He wants all that money to decorate the Downing Street. Why can't he pay it out of his £180,000 he gets every year?
Well, why can't he pay it out of the £30,000 that every Prime Minister gets every year anyway from the taxpayer? Why is that not enough? I mean, we talked about this a couple of days ago,
That's right. We're living on the breadline and they're living up at parties.
Yeah. Well, even if the party wasn't an especially flash party, it happened at a time when having such a party would have been against the laws that his party and his government introduced. Jean, thank you for that. Sean's in concert. Morning, Sean.
Darren, when I carried my brother into the Crim in 2020, right, 57-year-old, right, I sat down in only 12 seats in the Crim, right, and I cried my bullets out.
Yeah.
Right? Come out of the Crim, couldn't, to hug anybody, right? And then then he turns around and he says, you can have a party with 40 people in. When he was getting interviewed, didn't interview him, mate. Because I would have went to town with him, like.
Yeah.
I would have slapped his face off him. Because the laughter that was coming out of his face today, it made me physically sick, mate.
What would you say to him? Obviously, we want to stay away from I understand the anger. We want to stay away from any kind of threat of physical violence. But what would you say to Johnson if you were face to face?
I'm sorry, mate. He's got. I would have started the interview and say, "Look at you, liar. you've got to resign now as soon as possible. Because you are a joke. And you always have been a joke for 2 years.
But people will say that to him, and you're right, and he is, and he always has been. But people will say that to him, and it'll just wash off him. He'll just laugh as he did.
And when people were getting on Tom's show, and they were saying, "Oh no, leave him alone. He's done nothing wrong. He's had a party. What about it?" I couldn't have a wake for my brother. I couldn't have a cup of tea at the end of it.
I genuinely, I think we've spoken about it before, Sean. I'm really sorry for your loss, but I genuinely can't understand people who say this doesn't matter. I don't get that mentality.
I don't know what planet they're living on.
I can't understand it. I can't understand it.
I don't understand what planet they're living on.
Because this is the government of the country we're talking about. This is someone who has to have, apart from anything else, the moral authority to make those rules at a time of emergency. Hopefully those rules will never need to be made again.
Then Angela Rayner turned around and said, "No, he's scum." Well, he is scum.
Well,
Sorry,
she said Tories were scum, and I think I think in the context of the murder of a Conservative MP, or the death of a Conservative MP, the killing of a Conservative MP, she had to moderate her language. I think that was the reason for stepping back on that just a little bit. And I would also hesitate to say that all people who believe a set of political views or subscribe to the views of a political party could be described in such a way. I don't think that's true either. I do think that Johnson is a repulsive individual and a terrible Prime Minister, however. Mike is in Beverley. Morning, Mike.
Hi, Darren. Yeah, a couple of points. First one, at the time of the party, my daughter was managing a 60-bed ICU ward full of COVID patients, risking her neck when PPE was short, and they're out jollying it on the lawn, which is really infuriating. I was worried sick about my daughter at the time, and there they are having a party. But the other thing I wanted to say, Darren, was I'm puzzled why people are so surprised by Johnson now and what's coming out, because I'm sure you've got a good memory, and if you think back to Eddie Mair interviewing Johnson on the Andrew Marr show,
yes,
I know that was 2009, but you could see exactly what you were going to get.
Yeah.
A man who was totally dishonest, he'd lied to Michael Howard, got sacked because of it.
Fired from his very first ever job in journalism quote unquote, for making up a front page lead.
Yeah, I mean, it's gone on forever, so why people are surprised about it? And, I mean, to be honest, I've voted Tory most of my life, and I voted for Corbyn, because the instant Johnson was elected, if you give a dishonest man with no integrity power, you are in deep, deep trouble.
What's interesting,
irrespective of what policy they've got.
What's interesting about that is that so many people in 2019 probably did the opposite. They looked at Jeremy Corbyn and thought, well, that is someone we don't want to be Prime Minister. We don't much like Johnson either, but we'll take a chance on him. And that, I think, is probably what formed a big part of that 80-seat majority. But you went the other way.
I went the other way because Corbyn was more honest than Johnson. OK, he'd got problems, but Johnson has, all his life, he's done one thing, and that's put Boris Johnson first, his little clique of mates second, the Tory donors third, then the Conservative Party. The country comes last. Every decision he makes is based on what suits me. It's an absolutely appalling record if you just look through the decisions he's made.
Absolutely. But here's the thing, Mike. I think pretty much everybody knows that. Everyone accepts that. Johnson probably accepted about himself because it's demonstrably true and factually provable. But it's the number of people who don't care that fascinates me. Let's say it's 30, maybe even 35% of the electorate who know everything that you've said to be true, but also say, don't care, funny man, make me laugh, ha-ha, hairy face, not hairy face, but has funny hair, got Brexit done, whatever nonsense they happen to go along with at that particular point.
Yeah, it feels like a cult developing, same as with Trump. It's as though the truth's come out the window and we're living in this fantasy world of cultism and internet echo chambers. It's disturbing. I'm quite worried about the way things
are going.
Is
it diminishing? Because it does feel as if the number of people who are in that category is shrinking, that it's falling.
I think so, yeah, and I think the backbenchers will do for him in the end because they aren't... I might not agree with the RG or the CRG or whatever, but they don't like to be associated with someone like Johnson.
Well, they also don't want to lose.
No, they don't.
And they're
but
terrified of
when
losing
they
their
see-
seats.
When they see him as not an asset, I think they don't like him, and they won't have any compunction. It's not as though he's their mate, and, well, it's with regret, Boris, we're just going to have to move you on. They don't like him. So he's got no personal popularity within the party, and I think that it's almost now getting to the point of an excuse to get rid of him.
Mike, thank you for that. And I'm not going to name the MPs in particular seats, but there were lots and lots of Conservative MPs who were every bit as opposed to Brexit as I ever was, and still am, but who decided that they really still wanted to be an MP. And so they bought all of Johnson's nonsense, and they did the deal. They did what I would describe as a Faustian pact with Johnson. They recognised his election-winning powers, in return for which they shut up about Brexit. And there are MPs in seats with pretty small majorities who are, firstly, probably only there because Farage and his mob decided to stand down their mob of of candidates in those seats where the Conservatives were already incumbents, who absolutely would not have been there. If Farage had made a different decision, a lot of those MPs would no longer be in the Commons. They'd have been kicked out in 2019. It's those Conservative MPs, I genuinely wonder how they sleep at night. We're going to be speaking later on, not unrelated to this, to Mike Gapes, who was a Labour MP. He had a majority of about 40,000 in Ilford South, but he was one of the MPs that went on to form Change UK. Got absolutely annihilated in 2019, as did Anna Soubry, as did Luciana Berger, as did all the MPs who made the switch from either Labour or the Conservatives to Change UK or the Independent Group for Change, whatever it was called. They all got kicked out of Parliament, every single one. But I absolutely respect what they did. You can't accuse them of being careerists, because the careerist thing to do, if you're Mike Gapes, for example, would have been to sit on that majority of 40,000 or 35,000 in Ilford South until the end of your days. As it was, he was annihilated. Those MPs I've got some respect for, and maybe you do as well, regardless of your view on the Brexit issue. The MPs for whom I have no respect are the ones, and you include Liz Truss in this, by the way, the MPs who were stoutly opposing Brexit as the idiotic idea that it is and was in 2016, who are now mutely going along with Johnson's nonsense and indeed pretending that Brexit is a good idea, contrary to all available evidence. Let me read out, I'm going to read this out because it ends with the really dumbest phrase of all time, which is, I dare you to read this out. Okay. Double dare me? Hi, I think he's doing a great job. And people like you are picking on all these stupid fake stories. I guarantee you all these people who called up have been to parties during lockdown and broken all the rules. It's mainstream media just making noise. I dare you to read this out. Fake stories. Okay. Wisely anonymous contributor, because I wouldn't put my name to anything so dumb either. If I were to accuse you of breaking the law or breaking the rules or doing something wrong, would you say, no, I didn't do that? Or would you say, ask Sue Gray in a few months' time? Anyone who's innocent of doing something would say so. You wouldn't say, oh, there's an investigation going on as to whether I did this bad thing or not. I can't remember, I don't know. You would say no. Or if you did it and you were an honest person, you would say yes. You would plead guilty. So your idea that these are stupid fake stories is simply not stood up by reality. But I don't imagine, anonymous contributor, that reality is something with which you engage terribly often. Certainly there isn't much evidence of that in your text. And there's no evidence at all for your guarantee that everyone who's called up so far have been to parties during lockdown and broken the rules. In fact, here's a dare for you. Do you want to put that to Sean in concert? Do you want to speak to Sean and accuse him of having attended parties and having broken the rules when he wasn't allowed by law for more than 12 people to be at the funeral of his brother? Do you really want to do that? I'm sure we can make it happen. I dare you. Desiree has tweeted to say, on the 20th of May 2020, I sat crying. I cried for weeks because me and my partner had been separated for months during lockdown. I sat petrified of going into my front garden in case I caught COVID and died. It takes the mick out of us who are extremely clinically vulnerable. Desiree, thank you for that. And think back to that time, a time before vaccination, a time before boosters, when COVID was, fairly threatening for most people. We didn't really know a lot about it at that point, but we knew that it was potentially extremely dangerous to anyone. It might have been. We knew that the threat increased the older you were and the more vulnerable that you were, but we were at a time and a period when people who were clinically vulnerable were shielding. And whatever inconveniences, whatever heartbreaking situations arose for most of us, perhaps, in terms of not being able to attend a funeral or have more than 12 people at a funeral or be with a loved one as they were dying, for people who were clinically vulnerable at that point, they literally were not leaving the house. They were locked down in a way that even most of us could never really have understood, even at the very depths of this. I'm grateful for that reminder from Desiree. Thank you. 0345 6060 973. Boris Johnson does not deny attending a lockdown-breaking party, which took place at a time when the rest of us could only see one other person outside. Why shouldn't this be the end for him? Dale at Heathrow. Morning, Dale.
Hi, Darren. Hope you're well, mate. I must admit, in the short time that I've been listening to you, I've never seen you sound so angry. And fair play. I think I'm pretty much there as well.
Yeah. I'm just done with him. I'm done with it. I'm done with being led by this gaslighting oaf.
I must say, Mike kind of stole my thunder, because it was definitely the Eddie Mair show many years back, and just watching the answers, and also Eddie Mair being able to kind of like spell out what he had done. And it was, I just ask anybody just to watch that again if they can, and they'll just get an instant idea of what he was going to be like.
Yeah. And what's also striking about it is, two things. It took place at a time when the Johnson narrative was that he was this sort of lovable liberal clown who was capable of winning a mayoral contest in London, which of course he was. But you can see the mask beginning to slip, because my now colleague Eddie Mair, who of course worked for the BBC at the time, in taking him apart in that way, you can see Johnson think, well, hang on, I've never been challenged like this before. The truth has never been brought out in such a way before. And he was kind of horrified and outraged that anyone had dared to go there.
No, I agree. I agree with that. I don't want to put this down to every single person, obviously, because it's not true. But when you say that you don't feel, and I get this feeling that people don't care. I have called you before and said I believe all the front bench were sociopaths, and I still believe that. But I do kind of like think that if you were to kind of like write a list down of how many people in this country have committed adultery, how many of these people are homophobic, racist, and the big one of all, which you could probably put a lot of the population down to, that have lied at least once in their lives, then I think there you have such a big spread. One person's able to do all that, and you've got this mixture of people all around the country that I think have got a little bit of that in them. Not saying all of them, please don't, that's not a broad brushstroke, but certainly 38% of people whoever what it was that voted him in, you can see why people don't care about this. They're not interested. Why would those? Lying.
But why would those people, even if of course they exist, Dale, but why would those people not also want to think to themselves, I might be a bad person for some of those reasons, but I at least want our leaders to be held to a higher standard? That's what gets me. They're not even holding Johnson to a higher standard because he's the Prime Minister, as surely he ought to be.
No, I think that's a fair point. But I must admit, when you look at what's gone on, when you see what's gone into this country over the last few years, you just start to see that people are so busy, and this is no excuse, they're so busy trying to get on with their lives and I just think a lot of people they don't care because of the reasons I just gave, but also because politics, they don't care about politics. You hear it all the time. Well, Keir Starmer, they're all the same. Yeah. You hear this so often. I've never known Corbyn and Boris Johnson to be totally so different people. But I was hearing it in the last election. They're all the same. Yeah. It's because they don't care about politics. They're not interested.
I think there's more interest in politics now than there has been at some point in our history. I think 2001 was perhaps the low point for interest in politics, the second Tony Blair victory, which was a thumping majority for the Labour Party, but on a really low turnout, 55, 56% or something. And it's much higher now. It's gone back up from those days. So I think there is interest in politics. But you're right, there's a feeling around still from a surprising number of people that all politicians are the same. And I think Keir Starmer is on the Brexit issue in danger of leaning into that by having basically the same position as the Conservatives on Brexit. If you're going to say the same things, which is that Brexit is done and we want to make it work, then you're going to be accused, aren't you, quite reasonably, of being the same as the other guy.
Yes. I think also, if I just may say one more thing, I think also I did call you. I remember calling you and saying I was so gutted because I remember you saying you couldn't vote for Labour while they had this stance on Brexit. Yeah. And I thought about this, after I put the phone down with you. And I thought about this. And over the last couple of weeks, especially after his speech and that, this is Keir Starmer, and I started to think, do you know what? I think you've got a point. I'm not 100% sure I can vote for him while they've got this stance on Brexit. Yeah. I really don't. You kind of like you've ruined my thoughts.
I'm going to nuance or caveat that as well, because I remember that call, Dale. I really do, and I think actually the caveat is unless I find that the tactical vote to keep the Conservative out is the Labour vote, and it may well be. It may well be the case, because I think everything else being equal, it's obviously better to have Keir Starmer as Prime Minister than Boris Johnson. But on the Brexit issue, I fear there is still insufficient difference between those 2 points. Dale, thank you in Heathrow. Ben's in Cheltenham. Hi, Ben.
Hello there, Ben.
Hi.
He had a party in 2020, Boris Johnson.
Yes.
Well, I was on that shielding list, having to stay in because I suffer with severe asthma, and I was on a high risk if I caught it. Now, Boris Johnson having a garden party and inviting everyone, that's calling the kettle black.
Yes.
He's telling everyone, you must do this, you must do that. Why take one more for them and one more for us? If we did that, we would all be fine. But would they, they go and do that behaviour. They don't get fined or punished. They just get away with it. And I don't think that's fair.
No, it isn't, Ben. And again, I just wonder if this defence is going to be made again by some people that maybe the laws did not apply because this happened on Crown property. Now, whether that's true or not, whether that is a defence in law, anyone who's making that case in defence of the government is literally saying it is one rule for them and one rule for us. Okay, so make that defence. I know you're not making that defence, Ben, but anyone who wants to make it's Crown property defence, by doing so, you are accepting literally the principle of one rule for them and one rule for us. Good luck with that. Why does this matter? Chris has emailed with an answer. I work as a nurse in Oxford. The 20th of May 2020 is a date I remember because it was the day that I had to hold an iPad to help a 37-year-old COVID patient say goodbye to his wife and children. He'd been given 24 hours to live. His family could not come and visit him. This was going to be their last memory of their dad and husband on a screen covered in tubes and monitors. He was too weak to hold the tablet. We held it, with tears streaming down into our masks. At the time, says Chris, I had already been hospitalised for a week with COVID. Colleagues were dying. Multiple patients were dying every shift. None of us knew how dangerous it was, so my own wife and children, including a 2-month-old baby, had moved out. We were all working 13-hour days, 6 days a week, returning home to empty houses each night. Johnson might as well have stamped on the faces of everyone who put their lives on the line, from doctors to nurses to retail staff to bus drivers. They partied while we died and cared for the dying. He is not fit to lead the country, says Chris. So that's why it matters. That's why thinking back to what was happening on the 20th of May 2020 matters. Chris was going through that, and one of Boris Johnson's civil servants was firing out an email saying, bring your own bottle. Aziz in Perryville. Morning, Aziz.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Hi.
I'm just going to make the point that if you look at one of the icons of the Conservative Party, Margaret Thatcher, you could take a view of what you thought of her, how much you liked her or disliked her, absolutely hated her. But the thing was, she had principles. And when she said something, you didn't have to second guess what she was saying. You knew it was true. If she claimed a fact, it was true. I recall earlier on in the pandemic when there were shortages in the supermarkets. I think it may have been it couldn't have been Hancock, but one of the government ministers said, you know what, we understand there are shortages. We've spoken to the supermarkets and we're dealing with this. And one of the big supermarket chiefs said, you know what, he went on the next day to say, I haven't heard from anyone from the government. So I called around all but the other supermarkets. No one's heard anything from the government. It's just a white lie just to say we're on top of it. If you look at the Afghanistan evacuation, where the government's saying we're doing hell and high water to get all these people out, and you find out there's just one kid on a computer having to look at 500 emails and making decisions, and it's just, you know what, nothing they say is believable.
Can you imagine a situation like this? I mean, so much has changed, not least the 24-hour news agenda and social media and all the rest of it, but can you imagine a similar response to this from, for example, Margaret Thatcher's government? Do you think there would have been the same level of deceit and cover-up and casual approach to the truth?
I really don't think so. I really don't. And I'm not a Thatcher fan, but, you know, when she said something, you believed it. And it's not just Johnson, it's the entire government. It's, the entire cabinet, or this way. And anybody with any credibility, say Roy Stewart, have decided they don't want to be part of it.
Or they've had that decision made for them when Johnson booted, 25 of them out of the Conservative Parliamentary Party for not toeing the line.
Exactly. And Margaret Thatcher was considered right-wing for the Conservative Party. But if she was here right now, she'd probably be a left-winger because it shows just how far they've moved to the right.
I don't think she'd be economically left-wing, certainly. But she would be... I don't think she'd be as Eurosceptic as half of the cabinet, weirdly. Which is ironic because they venerate her to the most extraordinary degree. Aziz, thank you for that in Perryville. They probably don't, when they think of Thatcher, they probably don't think of her wearing that European jumper with the 12 then flags of the European community. Claire in Haringey. Morning, Claire.
Oh, hi, Darren. Hi.
Claire.
On the party business, yes to every single thing you've said. And by the way, thank you for your anger and passion tonight, because for all the time I've been listening to LBC, sometimes I'm screaming into the air about it. But you, in this one evening, you have just righted every single time that I felt really distressed and disturbed by what I was hearing on LBC. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Claire, for that. I appreciate that.
And as for the party, yes, Johnson is absolutely a disgraceful man, but every single MP who accepted that invitation an hour after that broadcast to the nation should also be fined and prosecuted by the police. Every single last one of them.
Well, on that, I just want to read you, and with so many texts and tweets on email and messages here. This is from Hakan, who says, we need to talk more about who attended that particular party. Do we name the people? Should we name the people that attended that gathering? Will they be fined? Named and shamed, it sounds appropriate. And someone else on this, Claire, this is Alan, who says, any minister who now fails to resign is complicit in Johnson's behaviour and should be ruled out of any leadership contest. So there's 2 points there. Take Alan's point. Do you think that, as he suggests, any minister who is now not as disgusted as you or I is complicit from this point onwards?
Yes, 100%. I mean, it's just got to be done properly. We need to have we need to know that the government has some integrity. At the moment, it's
Claire,
who is at the party should be up for the...
Sorry, the line broke up a little bit there. Just repeat your last couple of sentences.
Absolutely agree. No minister who attended that party should be up for the premiership, and indeed any MP who was at the party also should be fined.
Right.
I think it's an absolute disgrace.
I have to say, at the moment, there's no evidence. We don't know of any ministers other than Johnson and it seems Carey as well.
It'll come out, won't it? Yeah. It'll come out. Now, on the NHS, I, the other day, had to go to outpatients emergency because I had a problem with my hand, and the nurse who attended me had a paper mask on. She said she has never at any point from the beginning of the pandemic ever had a surgical medical grade mask. The paper mask she's got on her face is completely dangerous. It's not going to protect her from anything. Yeah. And when you think about, and I mean, that was all going on at the same time as well. What they were put through was such extraordinary danger, the NHS, and then they got a 3% pay rise. And I believe at the moment the Tory party is handing everyone a £2,000 pay rise, £2,000 pay rise, aren't they? The MPs are getting £2,000.
Yeah, and the point you make about all of this, and again, we have to think back to where we were 20th of May 2020. The country was still terrified, and we were being told that we, and rightly, that we had to stay in place to stop what at that time was a very, very dangerous virus without the mitigating factor of vaccination or booster. We had to do our bit for ourselves and for everyone else while this party was taking place with the... We were all standing on our doorsteps and at our windows applauding the NHS at this point, weren't we?
Yes. But, I mean, all of the MPs and ministers who attended, I mean, they are equally morally responsible.
Well, as I say, we don't know who was there. Maybe we'll find out in days to come. Maybe there will be another revelation of another party that Johnson and Carey attended in contravention of the rules set by Johnson's own government. Thank you, Claire. Pauline in Watford. Morning, Pauline.
Hello, good morning.
Hi.
Well, to me, he continues to smirk. And really speaking, Darren, I don't know that he isn't going to get away with this one, because I was amazed at the gullibility or the tamed way the man reacted about the refurbishing of the flat. And the way he's smirking and talking about this woman is going to investigate, I think is yet another tamed individual that is going to say, toe whatever line that he puts forward.
But we're now in a position this morning, it seems, and I've quoted ITV News and Laura Kuenssberg and Sky News. They've all been told by witnesses that Johnson was there, that Carey was there. We're also being told that Sue Gray will be specifically asking him that question, were you at the party? Either all of those witnesses and all of those journalists are lying, or Johnson is going to have to lie to Sue Gray. Do you think he will?
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, he is capable of lying to any and everybody. The problem is, though, if he is found out in a lie, I suppose that then they will have a real opportunity to get rid of him, because I believe that is definitely a totally breaking of whatever codes there are.
I think
if it can be proven beyond the shadow of a doubt. But if you remember the last time, he gave this very false apology to the man about the fact that he'd lost his phone or some such nonsense, and the man accepted it.
Well, I think what will happen, I think we're moving to a place where Johnson will concede that he was there, but will try to construct a narrative in which it doesn't matter, in which it's not important. He will appeal to that diminishing but still sizable constituency of individuals who will put up with any crap from this man, because funny hair Brexit. Pauline, thank you. Pauline Camberley. Morning, Paul.
Good morning, Darren. How
Hi, Paul.
are you?
Very, very well. Hope you're well too.
Good.
What have you got?
Yeah, good. Listen, I've obviously been listening with intent with all this bitter and twisting things about Johnson, and I totally agree, you know, where he's come, and I understand, you know, you're extremely passionate about that, and, you know, I admire all that, but I suppose the end of the day is we're all saying, you know, the papers will be opening up tomorrow, and I mean, he's not going to resign. I'm pretty sure of that. He's probably got another couple of years to go in the election. You know, despite what happens with the Sue Gray thing, and, you know, is he going to go to this 1922 meeting, or 53 or 54 of his MPs, I guess, going to cross the floor? Well, I don't really think so. I mean, what do you think your take on it is?
Well, you talk about the newspapers. Let's look at the Johnson fanboy comics, firstly, in their front pages this morning. The Express: enough, Boris, you must end Partygate farce now, which, you know, that has the tone of an angry parent to a toddler that they nonetheless love very much, doesn't it? You must tidy your room. You must. Daily Mail, Boris rocked by new party revelations. They're not exactly on side, are they? And you look at the other papers and it's much worse. The Metro, with a fairly straight reading of events. The Mirror, invite to do what you like. Number 10, party email bombshell. It's on the front of The Guardian as well. It's on the front of various other newspapers. The Eye, bring your own booze, focusing on that. So the newspapers appear to be rather less supportive of him even than they were 6 months ago.
Correct, yeah. But I suppose it sort of begs to deliver. I mean, is he going to be Mr. Teflon again? Is he going to worm his way out of this one again with his lies and his dithering and dathering? I mean, is it just going to go to sleep again after a couple of weeks? Or will there be another email come out? Is there a secret pyjama party they may have had at 7 o'clock that might come out? I mean, who knows?
If there is public anger that is sustained, that will be felt on the back benches, and those erstwhile craven Conservative MPs who actually care even more about their own futures than Johnson cares about his, they will conclude that he is no longer the election-winning machine that they believed him to be, and they will turn on him really quickly. Look at what they did to Ian Duncan Smith, rightly. He wasn't even allowed a chance to lose a general election. They booted him out before he had a chance to destroy their prospects in 2005. So I think that when this changes, it won't be down to Johnson having a moment of conscience and recognising that he's rubbish and standing in front of number 10 Downing Street and saying, I resign. It will come down to him being resigned by Conservative backbenchers, won't it? Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, but all his credibility is going to be gone.
Well, I think that ship is... if it hasn't sailed, it's certainly in the harbour, isn't it? Paul, thank you, in Camberley. I want to read some texts and tweets. I know we'll be a little bit late for the news, my fault. Peter in Guildford says, hi Darren, Johnson is a total liar, but sadly there's nothing that we the public can do to get him out, and he knows it too and is laughing at us. Only the rotten Tory party can get him out, and if they did, they should then have a general election after any new leader had been chosen by Tory party membership, so that we the public can have the chance to get the Tories out once and for all, says Peter in Guildford. Well, what does the recent history of the Conservative Party changing its leader mid-Parliament and then having a general election tell us? It tells us that if you're Theresa May, you managed to lose a 24-point lead in the polls in the space of 6 weeks to Jeremy Corbyn. If you're Boris Johnson, it tells us that you managed to go from a majority which you partly created yourself of minus 45 to a majority of 80 in the space of 6 weeks. Again, against Jeremy Corbyn. So I don't know what the history of the last few years tells us. Whether the new Conservative leader would think, I've got the public on side with me. I mean, if Liz Truss wins on the back... I know, we're all grimacing at the thought. Sort of laughing through the tears. But if Liz Truss becomes the next leader of the Conservative Party and the next Prime Minister, that will be on the back of Conservative Party members who I think in the large are frankly insane. Will she think to herself, yeah, but the public's with me too. They also think I'm great. They don't mind the fact that I was photographed holding a telephone the wrong way round. They don't mind that I'm most famous for shouting about pork markets and cheese and doing deals with Australia which are worth a tiny fraction of the GDP that we've lost as a consequence of leaving the European Union, something which I used to oppose until 5 years ago. You know, I don't know whether she's got the self-awareness to realise that most of us don't think what the frankly insane membership of the Conservative Party think of her. So, I mean, she might be dumb enough to go to the country and say, yes, let's have an election. I want to be Prime Minister. Let's have an election. She might do that.